Welcome to experiencing a national treasure of Italy, the rural people and the rural goodness. Rural friends like Gentile there with her fresh eggs, Giuseppa with her homemade fettuccine, Renato having found black truffles, the gold of Umbria, the black gold. The green gold, of course, is the olive oil. Down in the lower section, Chiarina and Marino toasting us with wine, their vino. Peppa in the middle holding the torta bread that she's baked on her wood stove, offering us a slice. It should be filled with prosciutto. And look at those prosciutti hanging behind Pepe in the last photo. Now, Pepe's daughter, Paola, and her husband, Leandro, who's a Norcino, a pig butcher, were making salami and sausages when I recently visited. Leandro's been a Norcino since he was a young man. His actual profession is a stonemason. He's a retired stonemason. He learned to become a Norcino, the butcher of pigs, from his father and his grandfather. It's an ancient profession, even depicted on the great fountain of Perugia, which was sculpted between 1275 and 1278 by those masters Giovanni and Nicola Pisano, sculpted in the white Carrara marble. And the lower part of the fountain presents all the rural tasks during the year in 2 panels. Let's look at these 2 panels. 2 panels per zodiacal sign, let us say. Here we have the Capricorn, because this is the time when pigs are slaughtered. Traditionally, the slaughtering of the pigs in Umbria takes place between the feast of Saint Andrew, who's patron saint of Scotland, end of November, and the feast of St. Anthony Abbott, January 17th. In this scene, the pig has been sliced open, and in the second scene to the right, the Norcino is carrying the slaughtered pig into the stall where he'll transform it into all that goodness. Right here, we can see the magnificent fountain of Perugia. And let me just show you this. And you can see that this is a masterpiece of sculpture. It's one of the high points of any visit to Perugia. Do see my Perugia video if you haven't. You'll also want to see the Zoom presentation of Norcia. Norcia in the southeastern mountains of Umbria. This is where we get the word Norcino, because Norcia was famous for the preservation of pork meat from the Roman times, when the city was called Norcia in 300 BC. So someone who's from Norcia is called a Norsino, not a Norcino, because a Norcino remains the pig butcher. All the goodness that the Norcino will produce is sold in a shop or a bottega called a Norcineria. This is a Norcineria, actually in the town of Norcia. It's a famous one. Starring here will be pork meat. You can see the pig right in the center of the sign. Interestingly this is of the Fratelli, the Answini brothers. They have an interesting last name. Sweeney means pigs. I'd be interested in knowing the derivation and the etymology of their name. At the Norcineria, not only pork products will be sold for you vegetarians, there'll be black truffles, delicious wines, wonderful cheeses, and the legumes for which this area is famous. The lentils of Castelluccio, the Rovella beans, and these have all appeared in past talks that I've given. As I mentioned, the pig butchering time leads us right up to the feast of St. Anthony Abbott. His feast day is January 17th, and he is the patron saint of animals in Italy. And probably because one of his companions, or his only companion, he was a hermit in the Egyptian desert, they say was a little pig. And in fact, he's also the patron saint of Norcini, or pig butchers. He lived in the 3rd century, died in the 4th century AD. And interestingly, Herpes zoster in Italian is called Il fuoco di Sant'Antonio, St. Anthony's fire, because what was used to give relief from it in the Middle Ages was to rub the skin with pig fat, lard. Now let's return to the Norcino Leandro and his wife Paola. When I arrived, they had just finished making 10 salami. Leandro was washing out additional intestines of the slaughtered pig for the casing of the sausages. I say additional because some of the intestine had been used for the casings of the salami. The intestines will be rinsed out with red wine. That's Pepe's red wine. And therefore, when the meat is put into the intestines, it will not have an unpleasant flavor or whatever because they've been literally disinfected with the red wine. Afterwards, the salami are poked with an instrument called il piccarello, which means the little poker, the little thing that pokes holes. The Italian word for this little instrument is called a pungi salame. Why is Leandro poking the salami? The perforations will allow proper aging of the pork meat and prevent rancidity. After the salami were prepared and all poked, Pepe would carry them, look at it, looks as if he's carrying tenderly a baby, into the wine cellar adjacent to the room where all the pork products were being prepared. And he laid them on a very clean, pristinely white sheet. And he said to me in Italian, here's the English translation, here in the wine cellar, our salami rest for 3 days, and then we hang them up to age. You can tell we're in Pepe's wine cellar. There's a wine cask right behind him. Outside, bubbling away in a copper cauldron, which had been blackened with years of use, were byproducts of the pig. Nothing is discarded. That is cartilage, bones, tails, ears, hoofs. All of these will be cooked down and they will be transformed into another cold cut, which is called coppa. Coppa is not aged. It's eaten fresh. After all of these have been cooked down, they're put into a sack. I remember when we killed our pig in 1976, and the pig butcher came, our Norcino, and he said to me, Anna, I need 2 clean pillowcases, and I didn't know why. Because all that meat and gelatin, which was boiling off, was pushed into this pillowcase, flattened down with a brick, and out came our coppa. Coppa is eaten fresh. It's seasoned with orange, sometimes lemon, garlic, a little bit of hot red pepper, and different spices. It is not aged, so it is a fresh, if you will, cold cut. I remember those days, and as we talked that morning with Leandro and Paola, we reminisced about the days when Paola's uncle, Adamo, was a Norcino. Adamo is no longer with us. We have fond memories of him. He was our Norcino. In this first photo, and this is the article I'd like you to see, it's on my blog, Pig de Prosciutto. These photos are taken from that article. In the upper left-hand corner, we have Pino in his cap, his hat given to him by my brothers, his coonskin cap, and our friend Renato, and you're going to meet Renato in this talk. In the upper right-hand corner, we have Adamo's wife, Antonia, and we're in the storeroom right off our kitchen. She's sort of wiggling the pig's tail. Behind me in our cupboard are the 120 bottles of tomato sauce we put up that summer, jams, artichokes under oil, the string beans we'd preserved, and so forth. This is another scene of Adamo at work transforming our pig. Oh, I don't know how it is I'm smiling in that photo because when our pig, that pig was Jaja, was shot that morning, I was up in our bedroom with a pillow over my head and I couldn't bear to hear it. These pigs, we had 2, were sisters, Jaja and Fofo. And I think the one in the lead is the Jaja here, the one who was butchered that day. And when I would go out to scythe grass for our rabbits, and you'd have to scythe a gunny sack every day, the pigs would come along and do some grazing, and that would assure better pork meat, better prosciutto. Here's the prosciutto. The prosciutto are the back hams. The spalla is the shoulder. And another thing which assured the best flavor of prosciutto, capocollo, salami, everything, was to make sure you had an acorn fattened pig. So in November and December, when farm work was less for everyone, the women spent mornings, afternoons under the oak trees gathering up the acorns. This photo was taken of me in November or December, but it was 1979. I know because I was pregnant. And I was pregnant with Keegan, who was born in January of 1980. So I think that was probably the last year we slaughtered a pig. Once the children came along, we just didn't have time to take care of all the rural activities that we once undertook. Now, Pepe here in this photo is preparing for the seasoning of the prosciutto before the final salting is done. He's using a mallet. He was a stonemason. Pepe learned to build and work in stone. He once assisted Pino, and he actually built their farmhouse. And he was squashing the garlic. Then he put the garlic in a glass of red wine, and that garlic in red wine would season the red wine, and he poured that over the prosciutto before the final salting. Let me tell you, you've heard about Parma hams and everything. There's nothing like the prosciutto of Pepe. You know, the local people who raise their own pigs and season them with something like this, the wine and the garlic. And then they get the final salting. Pepe's telling me they'll stay here 50 days under salt and then 10 days pressed under weight before we hang them to age for at least a year. So here are his prosciutti and spalle, and this is pancetta. This is the stomach. This is the bacon. And I like this photo. He looks so proud of these, and he's kind of patting the spalla, the shoulder, as if to say, aren't these something else? Beautiful. Paola and Leandro carry on the work now with great pride. Paola has told me, Pepe, my father, no, Papa, can't do much anymore. He's nearly 89 years old. So taking on the work of the Norcino is Leandro full time, and they do all the work, the slaughtering of the pig and the transformation into all the goodness. Here they're preparing the sausages. Paul is grinding the meat. Leandro has prepared the intestines with wine, and now they're filling them up. And then they will tie them. And in this photo here, you can see Paola tying the sausages. Here, Leandro is poking them with the picarello. And here are the sausages ready to be taken to the cellar where they'll be hung. Here's the picarello, the little prickster, if you will. I thought this was kind of a beautiful photo, how they created this beautiful spiral. But it's for a reason. Economically conserving the space. You don't have room at your table to have 100 sausages strung out. And in fact, when they finished their work, they had produced 100 sausages. There was a little bit of meat left. And I said to Paola, what are you going to do with that? She said, I'm going to make polenta with this ground pork. As I left, they waved to me. The salami's in the foreground. There's Leandro. There's Paola. And I went into the storeroom to see Pepe near the prosciutto, near the pancetta, the bacon hanging. I went out the door. We were in here, and the coppa was still bubbling away. They hadn't yet made it. They were still to make the coppa. And then Pepe started up these stairs. There's Pepe, nearly 89 years old. And I know he was going up to the kitchen. And in the kitchen, I would have liked to think that there was Gentile, his wife, making homemade fettuccine, as I remember seeing her do many times years ago. because on my Rural Life Revisited tour, visiting them was always a hit. She's not up there in the kitchen anymore. She's in the bedroom off the kitchen. She has had severe Alzheimer for 10 years. She's been bedridden for 4 years. And Paula lovingly cares for her mother, is there every morning. Paula has 2 grown daughters and 3 grandchildren. She's there every morning, washes her mother, bathes her, changes her diapers, in the blender makes very delicious food for her, spoon feeds her lunch, leaves the lunch for her father, leaves the father's dinner and the mother's dinner, and then goes home. And what memories of Gentile? There's Gentile with Pepe years ago, and they just finished baling 500 bales of hay. Pepe did it all alone, cut all the hay and baled it. This is a happy moment of a Rural Life Revisited tour. These people wrote me afterwards saying it was the most important and wonderful tour of their 2 months in Umbria. And 2 months in Italy. They were about 3 weeks in Umbria, and they will never forget visiting Gentile and Pepe, who offered us their wine and a little bit of their prosciutto on the bread that Gentile had made. A few years ago, we took Peppa to visit Pepe and Gentile in the evening, and here's Pino hanging over the fireplace were 2 prosciutti and 2 spalle, the back hams, the front hams called the shoulders, and we were going to Veglia. Veglia. The word vigil is in that word, the root. Veglia, we go to Veglia means going to pay the night vigil. It was a wonderful rural tradition. In the 70s, farm work would be done around 6 o'clock. It'd be dark. We'd take our flashlight, walk across the fields up to Marino's house and Chiarina, they were our nearest neighbor, to just talk. And sometimes the men would be making baskets, repairing tools. We might roast chestnuts in the fire. What memories they were. Now, many of the rural people, the few that are left, are simply turning on their television and they're home alone. This is Veglia at our farmhouse in 1976. Our neighbor Marino, his uncle, who's now deceased, and his beloved father, Genovino, who's now deceased. What a memory this was. This is Marino's wife, Chiarina, and you're going to meet them shortly. And this is the time of Veglia in the summertime. Chiarina's actually barefoot here. She's got something boiling in the copper cauldron in their fireplace. So as I left their home, I was thinking about the times I'd been up these stairs into the kitchen for Veglia, keeping the night vigil, visiting them, also maybe in company of Peppa. I passed their vineyard, remembered seeing them out picking their grapes, transforming their grapes into wine some years ago when this photo was taken. This is their vineyard, there's their farmhouse, and olive trees. I believe Pepe, I don't know if he's still doing it single-handed, picking all the olives for about 100 trees, and then the olives would be pressed at the local mill into olive oil. Now, after I visited them just about 10 days ago, I paid another visit to friends living down in the valley. Renato and his wife Mary, who's British. And Renato grew up on a farm, and they live now in a beautifully restored farmhouse. And Renato, for passion, hunts truffles. And he also hunts mushrooms. And he knew I was coming down to see him and knew that I wanted to talk about him and truffles. So he'd taken, the dog was in the pen with the other dogs at the time. He'd taken a couple truffles out that morning and he'd buried them. And we were going to see if Raymond, his truffle dog, was able to find one of the truffles. So let me introduce you to Renato. Well, I want you to meet my friend Renato. He's a truffle hunter. And
sort of.
He's sort of a truffle hunter.
Not professional.
Not professional. But when did you start hunting truffles? How long ago?
11 years ago, when I retired, I had to find something to do because doing nothing is impossible. So I thought maybe traveling was the best choice for me because you could go in the woods on nice walks with your dogs.
You could be in nature.
Yes, that's what I like.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, who taught you how to look for truffles? How did you learn?
I had a friend who was doing that for years, but I never taken consideration to do it myself. But at a certain point I said, why not? Seeing I love dogs, and why not trying with truffles?
Okay.
So,
what's the name of your dog?
This is Raymond.
Raymond, come here. Say hello.
He's fine.
Okay. We're going to now do a truffle hunt. He found it. Come in and get a look at this. Look at the black gold, which Ray found. So now he gets a reward.
Yeah.
Come here, Ray. He found the black gold. Renato, how are you going to cook this?
Well, we'll do some pasta. And
shave it.
Shave it on the pasta. Homemade pasta.
Tagliatelle.
Tagliatelle.
Hey.
Fantastic.
Also known as fettuccine. Now have a look at this. This is called the black gold of Umbria, found by Ray underground. And it's an underground tuberous. Okay, this is a summer truffle, which he had in his freezer. Yeah. And they're only worth about €120 a kilo. A good winter truffle will be worth €600 a kilo.
But this year it's not been a good season.
Because too much drought, or no?
Not enough
too
water,
dry?
Not enough water in the summer.
Right, and it has been a bad season for mushrooms as well.
Very bad.
He's a mushroom hunter as well as a truffle hunter, this Renato.
Yeah.
Not good luck.
Not good. And the white this year was about $6,000 per kilo.
$6,000 per kilo. 10 times the usual amount of the drought.
Yeah.
But what a perfume this has.
Yeah.
Profumo c'è.
Yes. Very few, but very good.
No, man.
Su. Va. Su. Bravo. Dai, bravo.
Give a kiss to Renato.
Dammi il bacino, vieni su.
Ecco.
Dai.
So there was our truffle hunt. Now, near our house is the ristorante called Giovanino. And often people will be there having a coffee after a truffle hunt. I met there some months ago, Michele, and he had said this was worth all the hiking as he held out to me a white truffle. I said, are you going to sell this? He said, no, this is for my family. Another time, Giuseppe was there, and he took me out to his car to meet his dog. And he introduced me to his dog. I forget his name. And I said, is he good for truffles? And he said, perfetto. And you could see the nice chunky truffle that was found by Giuseppe. Now, this is the question. How is it possible that the truffle, as it is underground, liberates its spores so as to reproduce? I'd like to read you something that I had written some time ago about truffles, because I want to get all the information to you correctly. Above ground mushrooms are called epigei, whereas the truffle, an underground mushroom, is called an ipogeo, and it belongs to the tuber family. How can the truffle liberate its pores so as to reproduce? The epigei mushrooms need only drop the spores onto the forest floor, and insects and animals, wind and rain, will then see to dispersal. But nature has given the truffle an invaluable survival tour, its perfume. When mature and only then, the truffle emits an unmistakable and intense perfume capable of widespread subterranean diffusion. The perfume rises to the surface and entices the highly developed olfactory sense of animals, pigs and dogs. Wild boar will find the truffle. Here in Italy, dogs are trained as cani tartufai. There's no special breed in particular. What's necessary is a good nose. The most prized truffle is the tuber magnatum, or the white truffle of Alba in Piedmont and Aqua Alagna in the Marches region, characterized by its intense aroma. Prices of this truffle normally can soar to 3,000, 4,000 euro per year, but as Renato said, due to the drought, 6,000 euro per year. Also, due to drought, we didn't have olive oil this year. We have the olive oil of our son Keegan. Olive production was way down. The black truffle is called tuber melanosporum, and it emanates a pleasing aroma and excellent flavor. And that's what Renato was showing us. Now, before I talked to you about Renato, I had taken you to meet Pepe and showed you some of his prosciutti. And now I'd like you to meet Giuseppa. Giuseppa lives on the land near Deruta. At one time with her dear husband Paolo. We've lost him recently. And prosciutti and salami and capocolo produced by Giuseppe and Paolo were always hits when I would take people there for lunch with them. On my Perugia Deruta tour, we'd see Perugia in the morning and then go to them for lunch. And after lunch, they might take us to the stall to show us the prosciutti. And here is Paolo letting us know che buono, how good this is, how delicious this is. He felt always that his prosciutti were absolutely the best. Sometimes for lunch, the antipasto could include their prosciutto, and here is Giuseppa slicing into their prosciutto. And this photo will just show you what good times we would have having lunch with Giuseppa. Here are two gentlemen who are on the tour with me. They're helping Giuseppa serve her roasted potatoes and roasted chicken, which she cooked in her outdoor bread oven. And they had raised the meats, of course. And they're letting us know, buonissimo, delicious. Sometimes when we visited Giuseppa, we'd also go out to the area where actually they keep the tractors, where the grapes would be hanging. And those grapes were being matured to be turned into Vin Santo, the dessert wine. Here on the left, we have Giuseppa with Paolo showing us their grapes for the dessert wine, the Vin Santo. And here is the precious Vin Santo on the table about to be served for us. It's a very precious wine. It has to be aged even longer than a year. And I asked Giuseppa recently about the name Holy Wine, and she said this: "È santo questo vino perché è così prezioso, e una volta era usata per le messe." This wine is holy because it's so precious. And one time it was also used for mass wine. In their Vin Santo, the grapes are Malvasia, Trebbiano, Grecchetto, and San Colombano. Generally, Vin Santo will always include those first two, Malvasia and Trebbiano, and then it can depend on what the vineyard of the person making the Vin Santo is yielding. One time I was at Peppa's house and we went into the cellar and she showed me with great pride her uva, her grapes. They were being dried not for Vin Santo, but for raisins. And I asked her, "What kind of grapes are those, Peppa?" And Peppa would always say, "I have two kinds of grapes, uva bianca e uva nera. I have white grapes or green grapes and purple grapes." And here are the demijohns where her wine was kept. We make wine too, and Pino makes wine from our grapes. And actually, I have these two photos here. This is simply wine. This isn't Vin Santo. But I wanted to show you these photos because what Pino uses is the small press which is the press, the torchio, generally used to make holy wine, sweet wine. We use it just for our family wine because our production is not huge, so we don't need the huge torchio or wine press. And here we're tasting some Vin Santo, and we generally dip into the Vin Santo Tozzetti. Some of you may have been in Tuscany and had these and called them Cantucci. Secret, everybody, we don't call these biscotti. Biscotto in Italian is the generic word for cookie. These are a particular cookie called Tozzetti in Umbria and Cantucci in Tuscany. I want to share another bit of rural lore of Giuseppe and Paolo with you. This was taken some years ago, and they were showing me, I was there just after Christmas, their calendario lunario, the lunar calendar they called it, or the calendario del sale. This was a tradition taught to them by Paolo's grandparents. Giuseppe was not familiar with it. And what they would do is they would take a white onion, cut it into chunks, lay it on a wooden board, a chunk for every one of the 12 months of the year. They would generally do it on Christmas Eve. Giuseppe told me some people would do it on January 6th, the Epiphany. They would drop a little bit of rock salt on the onion pieces. And then 2 days later, they would go to the stall and look at the onion pieces. Now, when they put the salt here, they were doing it for the 12 months of the year. So we have January, February, March, April, etc. When they go in the next couple days to see which of the onions had produced a good amount of water, they read them in a different direction. So she explained to me this would be January, February, March, April, etc. Okay, they would look at the onion slice. If there was a lot of water on January, they'd write on the calendar, a month of a lot of water. Here, and these are the words they'd use to put on their calendar. Asciutto, it's going to be a dry month. Bagnato, it's going to be a wet month. Molto bagnato, it's going to be a very, very wet month. So Giuseppe was showing me her calendar and how they had marked on it. I think they'd marked that Aprile, from what they understood from the onion, yes, was going to be a wet month, bagnato. And I recently talked to Giuseppe and I said, this was before barometers and weather reports and everything. What do you think about that? And she said, well, now we have a different way to predict the weather. But she said, Anna, it's wonderful to continue the traditions. And it is. And her son, Loris, today was checking out the onion slices and recording on the calendar the situation of the onions, whether they were asciutto, bagnato, or molto bagnato. Another tradition which is sacred to Giuseppe is the blessing of the cheese breads. The cheese breads are made at Easter. If you've heard my talk on Easter, they were certainly mentioned. I may have mentioned them in my talk, which I highly suggest seeing, Rural Life Revisited. It was one of my first Zoom talks and introduces some of these people. Well, when Giuseppe makes her cheese bread, and the rural people before Easter, the rural women will make between 8 and 15 cheese breads. And they're finished generally by Holy Thursday. And then on Holy Saturday, they're taken to the church for the blessing. Giuseppe told me she blesses her cheese breads religiously before they're baked, before they start to rise, when they're still in her kitchen. And she uses an olive branch. And the olive branch is a blessed olive branch. They're given on Palm Sunday by the priests. And we don't have palms in Italy. We have olives, plenty of olives and olive branches. But again, we've all pruned our olive trees. So traditionally in Italy, we're given olive branches on Palm Sunday. She always takes 2 or 3 home, and she will religiously use them for the blessing of the cheese breads. But she blesses them twice. Once while they're rising, And once when she puts them in her outdoor wood burning oven, she's already put all the wood in, swept all the ash out. Now they're in, the oven's hot. She's going to seal the door. And she blesses them, saying this: may they rise well and be blessed, so that those who enjoy them may have good health all year and a joyous Easter with family and friends. So she will bless them, but she'll also take at least one to her parish church on Holy Saturday as well for the blessing of the priests of the cheese breads on Holy Saturday. And when the cheese breads are baked, she slides them out on this huge paddle. There she is, proudly holding a beautiful Torte Di Formanto. Look at the shape. She has baking tins, and they have been bought. And we were talking recently about the Torte Di Formaggio, and I said, Giuseppe, I remember the baking of the cheese breads by our neighbor Mandina in 1976. And I remember that shape, and I remember why they had that shape. And she said, what do you remember? And she said, because Mandina would save cans in which she bought sardines or anchovies. Because she was a tenant farmer's wife. They didn't have money to buy baking tins. And she said, in fact, you're right. She said, now we can buy them. But at one time they had this form because they were growing up, coming up out of the cans of sardines and anchovies, which the farm women set aside. Hard to give you a recipe for the cheese breads, but here are the ingredients. The year I took this photo, I was with some people, some Americans on a tour with me. They were thrilled because they booked the Perugia Deruta tour for the Wednesday before Easter. And I didn't want to tell them there could be a surprise, but we got there and Giuseppe had just finished baking the cheese breads. Here's the ingredients for her 15 Torte di Formaggio. She used 90 eggs, 10 kilos of flour, kilo, multiply that 2.2, 4 kilos of cheeses, a pecorino picante, which is a sharp sheep's milk cheese, parmigiano, parmesan, groviera, which I think we can translate Emmenthal, Swiss cheese, 3.5 kilos of fat, which will be lard from their pig, some butter, which you'll buy, and their olive oil. And then yeast. And here's Giuseppe with some of the cheese breads just out of the oven. Others are still to come out. There's her olive branch for blessing. And this is the lucky group of Americans who were there that day when the cheese breads came out. See all her tins here? These are bought now. And they're specifically bought for the making of the torta formaggio, the cheese bread. Everybody makes them. Mandina, our farm neighbor, did. This is Mandina in 1976. Peppa, just a few years ago, she'd made about 10. They were sitting on her guest bed on a wooden board, and it was Good Friday, I remember. Pino and I went over there, and she wanted us to pick one out. But she said to Pino, no, you have to pick this one. And she said, it's the biggest, and it's the most beautiful golden color. And she explained to me that we had to have the most beautiful of them all as a thanks because Pino that year had contributed to her cheese breads some of our goat milk cheese that he'd made. So she wanted him to have the most beautiful. And there's Peppa's cheese breads. And there's Peppa in front of her outdoor bread oven. That year, those cheese breads had been baked in her oven, in her kitchen, her gas oven, not in the outdoor bread oven, which she's no longer using, but she used in the years they farmed. And Giuseppe Peppa is always a hit, visiting her on my Rural Life Revisited tour. This is a dear friend who toured with a group. Chris Samuelson, actually, a dear friend of mine. We went to school together at Santa Clara. She was part of my tour inside Umbria in 2017. And everybody get ready for it. I want to do it again as soon as we're past this COVID disaster. We had 10 people stay in our country apartments, and we had 10 magical days of tours together. And one of them was the Rural Life Revisited tour. And here we are visiting Peppa, and she is near her bread oven. This is our house in 1976 when we moved here and before Pino restored it. And this was the outdoor bread oven of the wife of the farmer, Gianetto, who had built this house. And it was all crumbling down. So we were never able to use it as a bread oven, but it was there. Every farmhouse will have a bread oven, either very close to it or actually attached to it. And every farm family will be making the cheese breads just before Easter. This photo was taken a few years ago. This is an American group with me. And they had booked the Rural Life Revisited tour. And so we'd been to visit Pepe and Gentile. We'd been to visit Peppa and saw her outdoor bread oven, saw her wine cellar. And we were coming to Chiarina and Marino's for lunch. And that morning, she had baked her cheese bread. So this must have just been either Ash Wednesday or Holy Thursday. And she baked them in her outdoor bread oven. And when the wood is put in it, she'll then use the broom to sweep out the ashes. And the broom is made from broom. That is a plant we call ginestra. I think it's translated Scottish broom, which covers the Umbrian hillside. And it will be the farmer who makes the brooms for his wife. Marino is showing us here the tool he used to make the broom. The broom is cut down in August after the broom has dropped its leaves. These are the hills of Umbria in May, when the broom is in full flower, and what a perfume. And then after the flowers drop, the farmers will cut the branches and bind them. And some people are still using them to sweep out their stalls. This is an oven now that Chiarina uses. She does have her wood-burning oven for the things like cheese bread, but she has this little oven, and it's a gas. And here, I think for our lunch, she'd roasted a chicken, or I don't know, maybe it was a goose. And this is another version, if you will, of the former bread ovens, which were of stone. The brooms were also used to sweep out stalls. And here's Nonna, 1976, with her daughter-in-law, Mandina, each with brooms. Nonna's name was Emilia, Nonna Emilia, but all of us called her Grandma. Even though she wasn't my grandmother, I called her Nonna, sign of respect. Always kerchiefed, because you're in and out of stalls, so you have to keep your head covered against the dirt. This photo was taken a few years ago on my Perugia Deruta tour. We had stopped for lunch with Giuseppe and Paolo, and after lunch we went out with Giuseppe to meet some of her animals. The cow, the dogs that Paolo uses to hunt wild boar. They have had a couple lambs and rabbits. And this is the broom made of Scotch broom. So the broom is made of broom, and we call it la scopa di ginestra, the broom of the ginestra flower. Now, after the cheese breads are baked, they're taken Holy Saturday afternoon to the priest to bless. They've all made many, like Chiarina had made 10 or so. I'm sure Juliana did, Rita did as well. But they'll take one to be blessed, representative of them all, on Holy Saturday afternoon in a basket. In the basket will be their wine, a salami, perhaps capocolo, always hard-boiled eggs, a pinch of salt, which is propitious, and sometimes the sweet cake as well that they're eating Easter Sunday afternoon. Because our Easter breakfast in Umbria is the cheese bread, red wine, capocolo and salami, and hard-boiled eggs with olive oil drizzled on it. And then we go to Mass, or the people would go to Mass. Can you imagine that after a nice breakfast of salami and wine and cheese bread? And here's Peppa going to the church with her basket to be blessed. Peppa's very religious about this. You see, she has one of her cheese breads here. She hasn't yet untopped it. She told me, you must always take the cork off the wine so the blessing can get into the bottle. So here's a basket waiting before the altar to be blessed, and they're really works of art, sometimes with beautiful embroidery cloths. This is a sweet cake, and this is the Torte Di Formanto. So this is called simply torta, the cake, but this is the cheese bread. Here's the hard-boiled eggs. The wine has not yet been uncorked. There's salami, capocollo, and here they all are before the altar. And the people are waiting. The priest is blessing them. And I remember, and see, there's also chocolate eggs now for the children. They add, new additions. And the priest saying, enjoy your Easter breakfast, but don't eat too much. I don't want any stomach aches. And this is Easter breakfast. Cheese bread, hard-boiled eggs, and I usually put olive oil, and drizzle lemon juice, salt, and pepper. And then there'll always be prosciutto, capocollo, salami, and vino rosso. Now, this is our house, Easter Sunday morning. And I think when this photo was taken a couple years ago, Francesca, my daughter-in-law, had made the cheese bread. And this is our son Keegan. This is our living room, dining room. Some of you listening to this have stayed in our apartments, have been in here for a meal. On the Rural Life Tour, Rural Life Revisited, we usually come here for an antipasto before we go to Chiarino and Marino for lunch. This was the oxen stall of the farmers who lived here before us, and now it is our living room. And I'm not able to share a cheese bread recipe with you. That's a little bit complicated. To get that, you must come sometime with me just before Easter to visit Giuseppe or Peppa or Chiarina as they make their cheese breads. But I'd like to share another recipe with you. Hello, welcome to our farmhouse. Let's learn together a rural recipe. We learned everything from our farm neighbors about life on the land, how to prune our olive trees, how to prune our vineyard, how to raise pigs, turn them into prosciutto, capocollo, salami, how to raise those chickens and turn it into goodness, like this Umbrian chicken cacciatore. This is an Umbrian rural recipe, and that means it is made of simple ingredients grown on the land by the farm people. Their simple ingredients included in this easy recipe are garlic, which they'll all raise, onion, carrot. They're all going to have rosemary and sage, probably right outside their kitchen door the way I do. They'll have their own olive oil, their own wine, and their own vinegar. Here's an addition that isn't Umbrian. Lemons. We don't have citrus fruits here, so they have to save precious pennies to be able to buy a lemon. The food must be quickly done because the farm woman must also scythe all that grass to feed her rabbits, slop the pigs, feed the chickens, clean all the stalls, and take care of the house as well. It must be delicious because she's cooking for Italians. Very close to any farmhouse, rosemary and sage is growing because it's going to be used in rural cuisine. Here's my sage, here's my rosemary, which I'm going to pluck right now for our chicken cacciatore dish. And you can see it's right out the back door of the beautiful farmhouse that Pino has restored. It was quite a ruin when we moved here in 1975. Let's go in now and cook that chicken cacciatore. The first step to chicken cacciatore, it's very simple. Put the chicken in a pot. You want a large, wide pot. There you go. Douse it with your wine, or you may have to buy wine. I've used about half a bottle. Vinegar, white wine vinegar, about a cup. There you go. Turn it on a fairly high heat and let the chicken meat absorb the wine and vinegar. Que profumo of wine and vinegar. Look at that. Now it's time to add the other ingredients. In goes an onion. Do I have to chop it? No, the chicken cacciatore is going to absorb all the flavor, and I've got to go out and feed my pigs. I don't have time to chop the onion. Garlic cloves, 3, 4, or 5. The celery's been washed. a stalk of celery. In it goes. Lemon. Don't even have to squeeze it. The chicken will absorb the flavor without me squeezing it. The carrot. I might want to cut it in half. I don't have to, but I've got a chunky one. Salt. And it's coarse salt. How much? Oh, about this much. Let's do that twice. I'll test later. Olive oil. Extra virgin. Take no substitutes. There we go. I'm going to let it simmer. Let it simmer uncovered so the wine and vinegar absorb. And now, since in the winter we cook on a wood stove, I'm going to turn the gas off. Let's just save on the gas. And this will simmer nicely for as long as it needs to simmer on the wood stove. And I have plenty of wood. You can have a look. We've had a lot of nice heat here. All right, everybody. It's time now to add rosemary and sage. Things are simmering down. How much? There's never too much rosemary, too much sage for chicken cacciatore. I have a couple branches. I'm going to always use a wooden spoon. And I'm going to shove the herbs down so that liquid absorbs all of the flavor. And I let it simmer, and in a minute I'm just going to cover it. And we'll soon be eating it and enjoying a buon appetito. Pino's ready to taste our pollo alla cacciatore.
Buono. Buono. E chi l'ha fatto?
He said, whoever made this? Well, it wasn't Peppa, and it wasn't Chiarina, and it wasn't Giuseppa. It was Annie, trying her best. Buon appetito, Pino.
Grazie, altrettanto.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me. And I'd like to end by saying buon appetito, whether you're sitting down to lunch or to dinner, probably most likely to lunch. And I hope you can join me soon in Umbria to drop in at Peppa's for a little bit of her pasta, or drop in at Chiarina and Marino's. Head over to Giuseppa's outside of Deruta to taste the goodness, to hear her stories. Meet this national treasure of Italy, the rural people, and let us also join together tasting the rural goodness. May we do it very soon. Buonasera from Italy. Buongiorno to all of you, wherever you are in the States, if you're in the States. And thank you for being here.